Oh, good heavens! Lilith, tell me it isn't true. The Sovereign's Tear, the royal heirloom entrusted to the Crown's collection that had been missing for weeks, is inside Miss Whitlock's reticule.
Can't be true, but it's possible. That's treason.
What?
Lilith Whitlock's world shattered the very moment her best friend, Jane Waverley, fashioned a lie before the entirety of Brittlefield nobles. For you see, this was no ordinary event. It was the engagement celebration of Miss Lilith and her fiancé, Mr. Crispin Fairfax. Every noble house in Brittlefield had gathered beneath the crystal ceilings of Whitlock Manor to witness this bliss. Crispin stood at her side, his hand a firm, warm weight on her wrist. Everything felt exactly as it should, until a sharp and high-pitched scream echoed like a glass flute. "Oh, good heavens, Lilith! Tell me this isn't true!" Conversation froze. The orchestra stopped playing. Jane's gloved hands covered her mouth as though she had witnessed a murder. I pray I am mistaken." Every eye turned towards her. She hesitated just long enough for curiosity to spread. Then she continued. "The Sovereign's Tear, the royal heirloom entrusted to the Crown's collection that had been missing for weeks," she pointed, "is inside Miss Whitlock's reticule." "What?" Lilith stunned. Jane was her best friend since they were 3. They practically lived like sisters. A servant hurried forward, taking the silk reticule from Lilith's wrist before she even understood what was happening. The clasp clicked open, and the servant reached inside. Slowly, he lifted a teardrop-shaped sapphire encased in a web of blackened Victorian silver. The Sovereign's Tear was not merely a jewel, it was the weight of 300 years of royal blood, cold and unforgiving as the crown itself. To lose it is to lose one's place in history, and to hold on to it is to hold on to a power no commoner should ever touch. The room plunged into a heavy, suffocating whisper. Jane looked almost like she was ready to cry. "Lilith, please tell me this isn't true." "It isn't," Lilith retorted. Before another word could be spoken, Jane produced several folded papers from her own reticule. "I prayed I would never have to reveal these." Lord Crispin frowned. "What is it?" Jane's hands trembled with practiced sincerity. "I discovered them only days ago." She unfolded the first paper. It was payment receipts, and then another. Jane lowered her gaze sadly, and she said, "I believed Miss Whitlock was merely struggling with grief after her mother's passing, but I never imagined she had been selling pieces of her family's history to finance such a terrible addiction. The gambling debts, the secret sales, I tried to hide them for you, Lilith, but to steal from the crown?" Lilith looked towards Crispin. You know me. I do not gamble." She waited for him to roar in her defense. Instead, he recoiled as if she was a plagued victim. His face, usually softened by practiced affection, hardened into a masked cold of fury. "My honor is not a bargaining chip for a thief, Lilith," he declared, walking away from her. He stopped beside Jane, inhaling slowly before addressing the room. "My father taught me that honor demands painful choices, regardless of personal affection." Lilith felt cold. "So, I cannot marry a woman accused of betraying both the crown and family. My engagement to Miss Whitlock is hereby dissolved." People gasped. He gently offered Jane his arm. "In order to preserve the dignity of both our houses, I hereby ask Miss Jane Waverley to accept the position once intended for another." Jane lowered her head modestly. "I would be honored." The elite of the city did not merely watch, they condemned. They whispered behind lace fans, their eyes like silver needles. 2 footmen approached. One took Lilith's elbow. She pulled away. "I can walk." She crossed the ballroom alone. Nobody defended her. The great doors opened as she was cast out, the heavy doors of her former life slamming shut with a finality that echoed through the cobblestones. The celebration continued without his bride, leaving her alone in the dirt as her reputation turned into ash in a single hour. If the betrayal of this moment had you clutching your dress or clenching your teeth, then you have to hit that subscribe button to encourage our house to keep releasing more records. Please leave a societal approval on this video and say something nice to the house in the comments as I take you to the world outside the ballroom. It was a different kind of nightmare. Lilith walked without direction, without purpose. The city's elegant avenues gradually gave way to a cracked stone streets where expensive perfumes were replaced by damp brick chimney smoke and the scent of rain clinging to old walls. She found herself in the lower districts of the town of Brittlefield, the old town fringes. It was after midnight, the hour when the fog begins to roll in. It crashed between buildings like pale water, curling around abandoned carts and forgotten alleyways. People who lived in this part of town locked their doors before it came. No one dared linger. Lilith barely noticed it at first. Her recalling thoughts echoed louder than the city. Something brushed against her ankle. It was the mist. She immediately shivered, and then a voice from the fog crashed at the back of her hair. Liars, the whole lot. It sounded dry and devoid of warmth. Who's there? She turned, but she saw no one. The fog began to hum, a stable pitched crystalline vibration that made her marrow ache. She heard voices in the mist speak, but saw no one. For a moment, she thought she was beginning to go mad. Her feet refused to respond to her mind as it screamed for her to run. Beneath a gas lamp that refused to take a flame stood a man. He was tall, elegant, dressed in an outdated charcoal coat with embroidery that didn't belong to her generation. His body was translucent. The lampstand behind him could be seen through his chest. The edges of his form flickered like the last flame of a dying candle. He smiled. It was not kind, but somehow devious. Her breath hissed. Finally, he whispered. His voice sounded strangely close despite the distance. Someone who can finally see the rot. Lilith could not breathe. She staggered backwards. Are you a figment of my imagination? Oh, Miss Whitlock. Reality has been lying to this city far longer than Jane Waverley ever has. He stepped forward without making a sound. I am Lucien Sinclair. The name struck something immediately in her memory. The Sinclair shipping empire. Impossible! You are dead. His smile widened. Yes, and yet, here we are. Lilith had not had time to process what was happening before the heavy rhythmic thud of boots announced. Out of the shadows stepped Roland Ashmore, the city's warden. He was a man of massive physical presence, his broad shoulders filling the narrow alleyway, his jawline so sharp it looked carved from the cliffs of the north. His eyes were the color of a winter sea, cold, grey, and turbulent. He moved with a fluid statuesque power, pinning Lilith against a damp stone wall before she could draw breath. The fog madness has taken you early, girl, he growled. Talking to the air is the first step. If you stay in the fringes, I will be the one who has to bury you. Lilith looked into his winter eyes. I am not mad, Warden, she hissed, and I am not a girl to be buried. If you think your sword can stop what is coming, then you are the one who is delusional and I can prove it to you. Roland stiffened, his grip tightened for a second as he searched her face. He found only terrifying lucid clarity. And then he let out a slow, frustrated breath that clouded the freezing air. Prove it then, he challenged, his voice dropping into a whisper. Prove to me that you aren't just another ghost-touched soul lost to the mist. And perhaps you might live long enough just to see the sunrise. As Roland retreated into the shadows to continue his patrol, Lucien drifted back towards Lilith, his spectral form casting no shadow on the wet ground. His eyes tracked the warden's departure with a glint. He is a man of iron and rules, that one. Lucian mused. But even iron can be bent if you know where the structural cracks are. He turned his gaze to Lilith, his smirk vanishing. I was ruined by the same Waverley tactics that left you in the mud tonight. They bribed my creditors, created false scandals, ruined my name. I have wandered the streets for 50 years, watching descendants repeat their grandparents' sins. His gaze settled on her. Until tonight. He offered a ghostly hand that she could never shake. I cannot touch the living. I cannot carry evidence, but I can listen. Lilith's brows knit together. I move where walls fail, and the dead are excellent eavesdroppers. He drifted backwards into the fog as effortlessly as smoke. You have been cast out of every ballroom in Brittlefield. I will be your eyes in the room you cannot enter, and you will be my hands in the world I can no longer touch. Together, we will finish a war that started before you were born. Lilith felt a spark of something hotter than anger. The pact was forged in the damp silence of the Brittlefield alleyway. Morning arrived beneath a sky heavy with rain. Lilith had slept little. She found temporary shelter above an elderly woman's bakery in the fringes after offering to scrub ovens in exchange for a corner in the attic. The widow asked no questions. Perhaps she recognized Lilith was as broken. As Lilith swept the worn-out wooden floors, Lucian hovered lazily. I must admit, he observed, your fall from high society has considerably improved your work ethic. Lilith shot him an irritated glance. The first test of their pact came days later during the Midsummer State cocktail party, an event Lilith could only observe from the shadows of the servants' entrance. Beside her, unseen by every living soul, Lucian adjusted his invisible cuffs. Shall I? She nodded. Go. His body dissolved into a silver mist, and in one heartbeat later, he slipped effortlessly through the ballroom walls. Inside, music filled the halls, the elite sipped champagne behind gilded doors, his translucent form hovering inches from the unsuspecting women. Lady DeWitt leaned in, her voice a low whisper. My husband thanks me for the tonic this morning. The fool actually believes I am nursing his heart back to health, unaware that the belladonna the Waverleys provided is slowly dying his heart. The Countess offered a dry, rattling laugh that made her pearls click. Your plan is brilliant. A wealthy widow is a far more useful ally than a husband with a conscience. She laughed some more. Lucian swept across the ballroom to a shadowed alcove where two merchants stood. The ship is already past the shoals, one whispered. She will be a coffin for the crew before sunrise. The Waverleys have already signed off on the loss after all. An insurance claim is worth 10 times the cargo. Lucian's spectral eyes flared with a predatory light before he dissolved into the grey mist. Back in the fringes, he materialized before Lilith. They are far more worse than I remembered. Lilith took this contraband of truth to Roland Ashmore that evening. They met by the basalt pillars of the city gate, the air thick with the scent of sea salt and coal smoke. Roland loomed over her, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the cobblestones. You expect me to mobilize a guard based on the word of a woman who talks to the wind? I need steel-clad evidence, Lilith, not the hallucinations of a woman who claims she has been served information by a dead man. Then, look for the frost in the tonic bottles of the DeWitt cellar, Warden. Lilith challenged, stepping into his space until she could feel the heat radiating from his brawny frame. Or check the shipping manifest for the siren's call at the East Docks. And if I am mad, your investigations will prove it. But if I am right, you are the one failing this city. The tension between them was tighter than a physical cord vibrating with a tense frequency. Lucian leaned against Roland. I rather like him, he mused. He's trying very hard not to shout. Roland looked at Lilith. There was not a single contradiction in her story. He heaved. I will carry out an investigation, and if I find out you have wasted my time, I will be the one to personally arrest you, Miss Whitlock. The investigation took 6 whole days. In that time, Roland found out that everything Lilith warned him was a literal slow death sentence. In the Derwit cellar, he discovered vials of concentrated belladonna hidden behind vintage wines, their seals bearing the private mark of the Waverley family. He witnessed the once powerful Lord Dewitt gasping for air, his heart being methodically silenced to make way for a widow's fortune. At the docks, Roland's guards seized the secret ledgers of the Siren's Call, proving that the ship had been scuttled by hand. Its crew sacrificed to the shoals for a chest of insurance gold. When Roland found Lilith again in the fringes, his winter sea eyes were no longer cold to judgment. They were burning with a new protective fascination. He began to realize that the woman society had discarded may be innocent after all. As the clock continued to turn, Lilith became a ghost within the machines of the city. She moved among the invisible, the weary seamstresses who sewed the Waverley's corsets, and the carriage drivers who heard the whispers of the elites in the dead of night. Lucien continued drifting through the Fairfax Manor like a silent shadow, whispering every secret whispered behind velvet curtains to Lilith. One damp afternoon, Roland summoned her again. Only this time, there was no accusation waiting, only tea. I have assigned patrols near whichever street you happen to be working. Lilith raised an eyebrow. Coincidence? I prefer thoroughness. Lucien burst into laughter, floating behind Roland. Oh, this is delightful. Roland noticed her attention lingered elsewhere. Is he here right now? Roland asked, raising an eyebrow. Who? Your ghost companion. He's not my companion. Her brows furrowed. And no, he's not here. Lucien's smile vanished before leaving the room. Why are the Waverleys not in chains and rotting in a cell? Her voice darkened. They are very powerful people, Lilith. Upon seeking warrants for their arrests, every evidence we've gathered mysteriously vanished. Their corruption is deeper than I anticipated. To be able to arrest them, we need concrete, undeniable evidence exposing their fraudulent acts. Roland paused. The city has become less predictable. That is why I have eyes watching you. I'd rather know where you are. As much as your claims have been hard to swallow, I believe you. And if not for your information, I would have not discovered how far the rot had spread. So, thank you. Lilith looked down into her teacup before he could see the warmth reaching her eyes. Roland pretended not to notice. Weeks later, Lucien was drifting through the Fairfax Manor. In the hidden conservatory behind the Eastern Italianate parterre, Jane's mother and a footman of the High Lord Ravenclaw stood in a frantic exchange. Lucien witnessed something far more scandalous, something powerful enough that could bring the Waverleys to their knees. He wasted no time reporting his findings back to Lilith. The gallows tavern smelled of ale and the heavy damp rot of the Brittlefield docks. Lilith found Espelt tucked into a shadow booth. She was still in her grey servant's wool, her hands shaking as she gripped a mug of cider to steady her nerves after working voluminous shifts at the Waverley Manor. You sure took long enough, Elspeth whispered as Lilith slid into her seat opposite her, her face partially veiled by the dark hood. I had to make sure I wasn't being followed, Lilith whispered back. Elspeth reached into her apron, producing a thick envelope stained with old wax. I found them. They were tucked behind the false backing of the mistress' vanity. It's all there. She pushed the papers across the scarred wood. Lilith tucked the evidence into her cloak. I can't thank you enough, Elspeth. You saved my sister when the creditors were at the door. It's the least I could do. Besides, anything to wipe the prideful smug off the face of those fortune-stealing bastards. Elspeth smiled. With the necessary documents finally secured, the stage was set for one final grandeur. Winter arrived in full splendor. Snow dusted the rooftops of Brittlefield like powdered crystals, while hundreds of lanterns illuminated the city's most anticipated celebration, the Grand Winter Masquerade Ball. The ballroom was a cathedral of ice and light, filled with the elites wearing masks of porcelain and gold. Jane descended the grand staircase, draped in ivory red, and around her neck shimmered diamonds. Whitlock diamonds. Lilith recognized every stone, and now they rested against the throat of the woman who had destroyed her life. Jane smiled at every bow and compliment. Lilith's stomach turned. Besides Jane walked her ex-fiancé. Together, they looked exactly like the city's golden couple. Lilith was disguised as a server, wearing a uniform and a grey apron, her face heavily veiled, only revealing her eyes. As were the other servants. A silver tray balanced effortlessly in her hands. The servants and guards assumed she belonged there. The nobles never cared about their existence to question them. Lucien hovered past her. Across the ballroom, Crispin accepted congratulations from two elderly lords as he smiled and nodded, until an icy whisper brushed past his ear. "December 12th, Lucien screeched. Crispin's smile faltered. He didn't hear the words, but it felt like a deep icy scratch at the back of his neck and shoulders. 23 years ago. Lucien ran through him from behind. He frantically looked around. No one stood beside him. Crispin began to sweat through his fine silk waistcoat, his hands trembling as he gripped his glass. "Are you all right, Mr. Crispin?" one of the older men asked. "Oh, I am quite well. I just didn't get enough sleep last night. Excited jitters for today." They all laughed. Lilith moved with the fluidity of a shadow, carrying the silver tray towards the center of the hall. She stopped directly in front of Jane and Crispin. With an intentional swing, she tilted her hand, pouring the dark crimson wine onto the marble pedestal, holding the Waverley family crest, a deliberate mockery of their names. As the elites gasped, Lilith pulled a heavy leather-bound ledger from beneath her tray and dropped it onto the floor. The thud was deafening. The orchestra fell silent. She reached up and tore away the veil. "I spent time in the lower district, Jane, and that is where I found the truth," Lilith declared. She lifted a paper from the floor. "This book contains years of payments." The hall fell silent. "Payments made by distinguished houses, payments made to your mother, money paid to preserve one's secret." Jane's confidence began to crumble. "What nonsense are you speaking, Lilith?" Lilith held the documents high enough for everyone to see. "The daughter of Lord Waverley," her eyes never left Jane, "is not Lord Waverley's daughter." The ballroom exploded into gasps and whispers. Jane's face lost every trace of color. Lily's voice carried across the entire ballroom. "For over 23 years, your mother maintained an affair with the Duke of House Ravenclaw." Every face turned towards the Ravenclaw delegation. He stood frozen. His wife slowly looked at him in disbelief. Lilith continued. "The scandal could have destroyed his family's standing. Instead, your mother used the truth as a weapon." Her gaze met Jane's mother as she kicked the ledger, spraying its papers on the marble floors. "Your family blackmailed the Ravenclaw house. They demanded wealth and influence in exchange for their silence. Your bloodline is a fabrication, Jane, and you are a blackmailer's gamble. And you, Crispin, you traded a life of honor." She took a painful pause. "For a seat at a table built entirely on a lie." Jane's face contorted, her porcelain mask of beauty cracking. "Mad, Lilith? You are certainly mad. I guess framing you for the theft of the sovereign diamonds was too light a fate. I should have poisoned you," she shrieked, pointing a gloved finger as her lips betrayed her. The ballroom fell into chaotic murmurs. A nobleman stepped forward as he ran his hands through the documents. His eyes widened. "My name." Another Jew grabbed a different page. "So is mine. These payments." Within moments, panic erupted through the ballroom. Every aristocrat whose signature appeared in the ledger realized that carefully hidden bargains had become public knowledge. Voices overlapped and accusations flew. Old alliances shattered within minutes. Jane looked around desperately. Nobody stood beside her anymore. Not even her friends who had once praised her elegance. They retreated one by one, ashamed and furious. Crispin reached for Lily's hand with her eyes full of pathetic, desperate longing. She withdrew before he could even touch her. "You have to understand. I did what I thought was best." Lily said nothing, her expression filled with a coldness that was sharper than any blade. She turned her gaze towards the edge of the room. Roland Ashmore was there, his hands resting on the hilt of his sword. For one terrifying moment, Lilith wondered whether duty would prevail and the city warden would arrest her for exposing half the nobility. Roland slowly drew his sword and the steel rang through the ballroom. "Stand aside!" He pointed the blade, not at Lilith, but towards the crowd. "Make way!" He cleared an open path through the raging guests. "Go, you are under my protection." She nodded almost imperceptibly. But then, everything suddenly changed. The chandeliers flickered violently as a bitter wind swept through the sealed ballroom. Grey mist began pouring beneath every doorway, through the ballroom windows, turning the gala into a spectral trap. The guests' screams were muffled by the thickness of the unnatural atmosphere. The fringes had entered into the palace. Ghostly silhouettes appeared inside the mist. Long-forgotten faces of servants, children, merchants, widows, every unresolved sorrow the city had buried. Lucien stood at the center of it all. His translucent figure glowed brighter than ever before. "The fog remembers," his voice echoed from everywhere. "So many lies." He turned towards Lilith. "Join us. You can end every deception forever. Together, we could become East's judge." For one dangerous heartbeat, Lilith felt it, the unbearable temptation to never be hurt again. She felt the cold pull of the void, her spirit beginning to fray at the edges as the mist attempted to claim her. But then, a hand, warm, solid, and impossibly strong, grabbed her wrist. Roland had charged through the thickened fog, ignoring the screeching of unseen people. "Lilith!" His eyes locked on hers with a desperate intensity, his grip an anchor that defied the laws of the dead. "The city can burn its lies to the ground, Lilith, but I am not letting you go with them. Choose the living. Choose me." Time seemed to stop. Lilith looked at Lucien and then at Roland, one representing endless satisfying vengeance, the other representing our tomorrow. She pulled her hand from the spectral mist as she shakingly held onto Roland in a tight hug. The fog shattered like frozen glass. Lucien closed his eyes, a peaceful smile touching his face for the first time in 50 years. "There she is," he whispered. "The woman I had hoped you would become." Golden light spread through his translucent form, his bitterness melted away. As he faded, he left behind a final gift, the legal documents proving that the Sinclair shipping fortune, the greatest in the kingdom, was all available to be claimed by the only surviving kin, Lilith. "Thank you for ending the war." The light drifted upwards as her great uncle vanished forever. Within months, the Waverleys' name became synonymous with disgrace. Their estates were seized pending investigation. The scandal left them in a social exile so absolute they were forced to flee the city by nightfall. Crispin inherited nothing except regret. No respectable house wished to join themselves with a man who had abandoned honor for convenience. Months later, the trauma of Brittlefield had been replaced by quiet, prestigious order. Lilith remembered every person who had stood beside her when she possessed nothing. Instead of rebuilding another mansion of excess, she rebuilt lives. She established fair wages for household servants across Sinclair-owned estates. She opened apprenticeship schools for children of laborers, teaching reading, accounting, and skilled trades for free of charge. She funded warm lodging houses near the fringes, so no widow or orphan would be forced into the freezing streets where she had once wandered alone. Even Roland helped draft new city ordinances, protecting workers from false charges made by powerful employers. Lilith and Roland shared a dinner at the reclaimed Sinclair Conservatory one evening, the glass dome above them reflecting a sky that was clear as the old fog hovered over the lower districts. It was no longer a threat to Lilith or anyone. It was a mark of the city's true strength. Being betrayed by one's best friend is something that leaves a mark in your heart forever. If you've ever been betrayed by a best friend or loved one, I would love to hear your whispers in the comments. Please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to join our house. Thanks for watching.